Hello and welcome to the 2019 Performance Review Training for Leaders. My name is Erin Grabansky and I am the Performance Specialist in Human Resources. Today we'll be going over the performance review purpose, who will receive a performance review, the timeline and steps for the performance review process, what's new for this year, resources, and what's next. Performance reviews. What are they and why do we do them? This is a defined time to support structured performance and career development conversations between leaders and employees. This is a great time for you to sit down one-on-one with your employees and have a more structured and formal conversation with them versus maybe just having the 15-minute conversations you have throughout the year. This also aids in providing timely reviews of employee performance and ensures all employees are evaluated annually. Joint Commission asks that we evaluate our employees every 3 years minimally. However, at Altru, we have a policy stating that we will be reviewing our employees annually. So Joint Commission holds us to that policy. So we review our employees annually, and it's a great practice to be able to sit down and speak with our employees about the past year's work. So what a performance review is: motivation. So this is a time to recognize achievements and identify opportunities to grow for your employees. Information sharing. At this time, it's a great idea to reshare those mutual expectations, things that you expect your employees to be doing on a day-to-day basis, and even sharing what your expectations are in order for them to score a certain score on the performance review. Not all employees are aware of what it may take to have a specific score that they're trying to achieve. So sharing those expectations with them makes it a lot more transparent for them during the performance review process. This is also a time that you can go into the performance review and look at the employee's past performance, whether you completed past performance reviews or another leader did. You do have access to those at this time, so you can look into the review and see what was said last year, what were things that they wanted to work on or achieve, and then what did they do to get there, or did they do that at all and they need to have that readdressed for this year. Development. You can identify strengths and opportunities for them to grow and achieve for next year. So if there are items that they truly need to develop on, it's a great time to identify those and then work out a plan to help them develop. Validation, making sure the employee is competent in their role. So this is really speaking to that job-specific competencies question in the performance review. So you're scoring them and making sure that they're competent. If not, what else can they do to become competent? Maybe that's a skills validation that they need to do, some education, whatever it is that they need to do to become competent in their role. And then documentation. So this is a great time to review the documentation you've been having on your employees from the past year. You can do all of your documentation in SABA, and we actually prefer that it is done in there, as when the consultants in human resources, if you're not familiar with them, they are on our employee relations team. They do go back and look at documentation if you were to call and ask for performance management on an employee. They also go through and look at past performance reviews. If you have an employee that you have concerns on that have stemmed from the previous year, they do go look at past performance reviews to see if those items were coached to or documented in performance reviews, and they even review past scores. So it's very important that documentation is accurate, as well as the scores that you're giving employees reflects truly how they're performing, as we do use that for performance management purposes. Also, looking for career advancement. It's great to document and recognize employees for all of the hard work or good things they've been doing for your team. And this allows you to go back into the system and pull those up easily for that employee should they want career advancement. What a performance review is not. So it is not a surprise, making sure we're not saving up ongoing issues to share all at once. If you have an employee that does need to have a performance improvement plan launched for them or some sort of performance management, my recommendation is to reach out to the consultants prior to the performance review to have a game plan set in stone, or at least to get ready for that conversation prior to the performance review. Because the performance review is not a disciplinary action. The review needs to reflect accurate information of all of the aspects to patient care. And so not just if they have one item that they need a performance improvement plan on, we want to make sure that this isn't the first time that they're hearing something about this now. And so it would be a good idea to launch that PIP prior to delivering that performance review. So if you have any concerns about an employee's performance and you're not quite sure if it needs to have a performance improvement plan or not, my recommendation is to always reach out to those consultants but prior to meeting with the employee, just to make sure that you're good to go and everything is set. So who will receive an annual review? New employees hired prior to July 1st, 2019. Anybody hired 7/1 and after will only complete the 6-month performance review at its scheduled due date, meaning if they were just hired in November, they won't get a 6-month performance review until after the new year. Employees who have transferred. So we get a lot of questions for transfer employees. The same for them. Employees who have transferred throughout the year will have both the 6-month performance review in addition to the annual review, and those will happen at their scheduled due dates. So if you have an employee who transferred in this past year, whether that was at the beginning of the year or towards the end of the year, if you were assigned to that employee on November 18th, 2019, you will be assigned the performance review. So my recommendation is if you need to go and contact that previous leader and talk and collaborate about the content of the annual performance review, that is fine. You guys know your employees best and you know who needs to be present for this performance review meeting. Also, if you do need to have a performance review forwarded to a new leader, maybe the employee is transferring in December, please let me know and I can assist you in getting that to the correct leader. The process timeline and steps. So the performance review, self-review for the employees and the peer review launched on November 18th. That was the first day of the process. So steps 1 and 2 should have been available to employees on that very first day. Now, if you assigned peer reviews that first day, they would have gotten it. If it took you a few days to get those peer reviews assigned, then they would get that the day you assigned them. Both of these steps are due January 18th, 2020, and will be pushed to the leader after that date. And what I mean by pushed is any steps that are still outstanding or still needing to be complete will be closed and will be forwarded on to step 3. So step 3 is leader completes the review form. Once you as the leader write the performance review, you will then be asked to submit it to the secondary leader for approval. The secondary leader at this time can either approve it and move it on to the next step, or there is a button on the top right-hand corner of the screen where the secondary leader can send back to author. And you, as the leader who originally wrote the performance review, are that author. Now, the secondary leader, too, just a side note for anyone new, this is something that was done last year as well, but that secondary leader is your one-up. So whomever is your one-up for this employee. After the secondary leader approves the performance review, it'll move on to steps 5 and 6, which are the leader and employee meet and leader signs off. So at this time, the leader and employee will meet and sign off. And then as soon as the leader signs off, they will have access to the employee sign off step. I highly encourage as a leader to have the employee sign off with you. This really just makes the entire performance review process final, and you don't have to worry about the employee going back in at another time to sign off. We did add a statement at the bottom of the performance review this year stating that by signing off, the employee does not necessarily agree to the content of the form. It just means that they are signing off that they have met with the leader and have gone over its contents. So all of those final steps are due February 29th, 2020. So the last day that you'll be able to submit it, you'll have all day, February 28th, that's a Friday. And then at the end of the day on the 28th and on early morning on that Saturday, the process will fully close. So you have the end of the day on Friday, that whole week to complete, and then the process will be closed on Saturday. A few items to make note of. Steps 1 and 2 both need to be fully complete until a leader will even have access to writing the performance review. What this means is if the employee has completed their self-review, but you as a leader still cannot write your performance review for this employee, what it means is that the peer reviews are still open and needing to be completed. And vice versa, if you can see that all the peer reviewers are completed with their forms, but you still don't have access to the leader writes review step, that means the employee has not yet completed their self-review. So both of those steps for that employee have to be fully completed before the leader will have access to write the review. When the leader pushes on their performance review to the one-up for approval, the form will be locked, meaning you can't go back and modify it. And this is due to making sure that once your secondary leader has approved it, or let's say they have changes that they want to discuss and make with you, and they can send it back, it's to make sure that after discussing all of the changes and having a transparent conversation about what the performance review is going to entail, when that step goes on to the leader meets with the employee, nothing has changed. So all of the content that you and your one-up have discussed is still the same, and you both know what the conversation is going to entail. Now, that doesn't mean that during the conversation, things that won't happen, that conversations won't change. It simply means that you guys are on the same game plan going into the performance review. So if you do get to the step 5, leader meets with employee step, and there are changes that need to be made to the performance review, you can contact me to have that rolled back to step 3. I want to note, though, that when you do have a performance review pushed back to step 3 in the leader rights review step, it needs to go through steps 4 and 5 once again. So the secondary leader will need to sign off again on any of the changes you made, and then step 5 will need to be signed off again as well. So just making sure from a time frame standpoint, you're aware if things are being rolled back, that they need to go through the approval steps once again. So what's new this year? Feedback. Feedback from peers will not be in the final form, and leaders are to use feedback as an additional resource only. So there are no sections for you to be able to copy and paste peer feedback into the form, as we're really pushing the anonymity for employee feedback. You can share this with your employees, and I encourage you to share this at the huddles, that any feedback you're receiving as a leader for an employee will not be written verbatim on the performance review. Now, you are encouraged to use this feedback to then make your own comments and make your own assessments for scoring, but you will not be copying and pasting directly for the employee. We are also recommending a minimum of 3 peer reviewers per employee. This is a best practice. However, understanding that as we get closer to the due date and there may be employees who do not have 3 completed on them, it is okay at the end of the day if an employee did not reach that minimum of 3. We are asking you to assign 3. If an employee doesn't get 3 back, that is okay. But it is a best practice, and we highly encourage you, as peer reviews may already confirm what you know about an employee, but you may also learn something new. So it really doesn't hurt. Some employees that I encourage peer feedback for are those transfer employees. So if you did have an employee transfer during the year, it's a great practice to send peer feedback to past coworkers. You can ask for their names, or even the past leader as peer feedback, if that's how you would like to have that information sent to you. If you have employees with disciplinary actions, they would also be good receivers for peer feedback, because you may find that they are improving in the performance issues that you've noted, or maybe they aren't, and you need to readdress those with the employee. If employees are asking about the high volume for peer feedback, as I know that some may receive more this year than normal, please encourage them to complete as soon as they get them, but also remind them that they are getting a lot more time to complete them this year. I believe last year we gave about 2 weeks for them to complete both their self-reviews and the peer feedback step. We are giving them 2 months total this year, so a lot more time for them to be able to get in and complete those peer feedback pieces. But we do understand that sometimes they can be asked for a lot of them. So encourage them to do it as soon as they are able to, but also note that they are having more time to complete them this year. So what else is new? Weighting. Last year, the job and clinical skills and knowledge and behavior standards were both at 40% and goals were at 20%. This year, we bumped the job and clinical skills and behavior standards down to 35, and brought safety up to 10%, and goals have remained at 20%. So we brought safety back up to be weighted this year at 10%, as it was unweighted last year. Forms will also no longer include numerical scoring. So overall scores are really calculated behind the scenes and will populate a final word score. The only section that you will see a 1 through 5 score on is the goals section, as a lot of goals for employees are cascaded down from leadership and you already have your 1 through 5 designated. So we don't want to make that too confusing for you. We did allow that to be that 1 through 5 scale. But the overall rating and the rating for the rest of the sections are that verbiage only. And the overall rating will really be that excellence, exceeds, achieves, needs development, or not acceptable verbiage. Goals are also new this year. So we will be reviewing the 2019 goals as in past years, so that didn't change. However, we will not be reviewing the 2020 goals going forward. So we will not be expecting you to review new goals with your employees or be writing them in the performance review. Now, that does not mean that we do not expect you to create goals within your teams, to let your teams know of your department goals, to still have them posted on the unit. Anything you do now, we still encourage you to do for next year. They will just not be in the employee's personal performance review. And really the biggest thing with that is that goals and some of the department goals that need to be measured for the employee's performance review, we don't have results for until about March, which really pushes the timeline back for performance reviews well into the new year. And our feedback for the past year then doesn't become timely anymore. So we want to make sure that any feedback we give employees is timely and addressed as close to the past year as possible. Any goals from past review from last year, or if they were added during the year, will auto-populate into the employee's performance review. If your employees did not have any goals, they will be asked to add a goal, and they will be asked to score their own goals this year. And that is due to some employees having personal goals that they work on or even are assigned to by their leader that aren't necessarily tied to department goals. And we want them to be able to self-score and give reasoning as to why they scored themselves the way they did. Now, as a leader, you do have the final say in which goals will be scored and what the overall score will be. So if you have a department goal that an employee scored themselves on, when it gets to you, you will have the final scoring as you know the final results for those goals. For the form itself, we'll be going over the 4 sections. So this first section is the behavior standards, and this is what it actually looks like on the performance review. So the behavior standards section is actually 3 parts, but part 1 and part 2 are text only. So this doesn't feed into the employee's overall score. This is truly just a conversational piece. So part 1 asks you to list 1 behavior standard in which the employee exceeds and provide concrete examples in the space below. And part 2 asks you to list 1 behavior standard in which the employee could further develop and provide concrete examples on how this can be achieved below. So for both sections, employees are asked to give their self-responses. And if you have an employee that maybe of any of the behavior standards, they really don't have one that you would label exceed, please just pick the highest rated behavior standard. And then the same goes for part 2. For employees listing, on you listing a behavior standard that they could develop in, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are having poor behavior by any means. They could be and achieves across the board, but they have 1 behavior standard that they simply could work on the most. So it doesn't need to be negative. It could just be a true area that they could improve on, and they could be a high performer. So just trying to get a different lens on the view of these questions that can be different depending on the employee. Now, you may also get examples that are different from the employee than you would rate. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. So you can feel free to list either example, discuss the differences, discuss why you maybe had different answers. Use your discretion as a leader, especially for part 2 though, as we don't want to discourage the employee if we have a couple different answers. If you find that maybe their answer was more appropriate and you want to go with what they had stated, by all means, feel free to agree with them. However, if you do have a behavior standard that you think does need to be addressed more than what they had listed, feel free to bring that up. I don't want you to not bring it up for the sake of not wanting to stir the pot. It's great to be able to address those examples and trying to word it in a way that they can develop on them. Part 3 is the actual scoring part of the behavior standards section. So this is where on the back end, the overall score will be pulled from. So the scoring verbiage has changed for the behavior standards section. We changed it to a frequency versus a level rating verbiage. So overall, we're asking you to rate the frequency in which the employee's performing to Altru's expectations for behavior standards. And this always should be hard to achieve. And it sounds tough, but we all have bad days and we all have behavior standards that we can work on. And you can feel free to use some of the examples given from part 2 above to help support your rating if you need a couple extra talking points, but always should be quite hard to achieve as we all have things that we can work on and we all aren't 100% all the time when it comes to behavior standards. Job-specific competencies. So this is the second section. This has not changed from last year, so it is the same as last year's section, the same scoring verbiage, and then the comment section where you can document your supporting comments on why you scored the employee the way you did. Safety and security. So this question did change a little bit this year. We did have some examples that we pulled as organizational hot topics or items that we heard frequently from the units. Now, this is also going to that frequency rating. So overall, rate the frequency in which safety and security practices are followed on a day-to-day basis. So how often is an employee adhering to all of our safety practices? And you know your employees and what it takes to be safe for them individually. I know examples that are given below really are more for that patient care focus, but you know your areas and you know if they're locking their computers, they're encrypting their emails, all of the things it takes to be safe in their area. And then also providing those supporting comments below on why you rated them the way you did for safety and security. And the last section being goals. So the past goals will populate, and then the weight of all of the goals together must equal 100%. This is just kind of a housekeeping item. So if you have 2 goals, the weight would be 50-50, for example. Now you know the weighting of each goal and which ones would be rated higher if that's how you weight them. But that's just my pretty easy example. So what are your resources? As a leader, you can go to the system announcements. So we'll post announcements as a lot of those deadlines we discussed earlier are coming due. So we want to make sure employees and leaders are both informed on the deadlines and what's expected of them. There's also under human resources on Altru Link, the performance page. So that will be the SABA page that holds all of the guides for both employees and leaders. I don't expect you as a leader to really know the ins and outs of the self-review portion for the performance review, as you aren't going to be asked to do a self-review, as that'll be in LEM. So my suggestion is if an employee has questions, feel free to reference them to these guides, to this performance page, as they'll be the best help for them. Now, if you have questions that the guides can assist or the announcements don't answer, feel free to reach out to human resources, both you and your employees, especially if as a leader you want to talk with one of the consultants prior to your meeting with your employee. That is okay. We would much rather you reach out prior to the performance review than wish you had after. So what's next for you? Start looking at your calendars. So start looking to see, as we start getting into the actual delivering of the performance reviews, if you have employees who are flex, making sure that you're trying to schedule time to go over their performance review with them. while they're here, as they may be the hardest to reach. If your employee is going out on PTO in January and February, if you know that someone may be going out on a leave, trying to deliver theirs early. So start scheduling time on your calendars to either deliver with specific employees or just block off time altogether. Please do not schedule yourself for a full day of performance reviews. You will definitely be mentally exhausted at the end of it. Performance reviews are tasking. So although it's a lofty goal, try to do it in more bunches rather than all through one day. Right now, we are going to watch on how to launch and monitor peer review forms. So I'll show you how to do that. And then we'll also look at how to check on the status of your employees. So checking on if they've completed their self-review or what step in the process they are all at. Once you're in the homepage of SABA and you're all signed in, you'll see the task Assign Peer Reviewers. So you'll see here that under my test supervisor, Hal, he has 2 to do. Now this task, I just want to point out that will not disappear until all of the peer reviewers for all of your employees have been completed. So this is an easy way for you to be able to check in periodically without having to dig around in your past tasks, as this will stay active until every peer reviewer for every employee is fully completed. So to access this list or to manage the list, you can go ahead and click on the tile, and you'll be brought to your employee list for employees you need to assign peer reviewers for. Now I can see Hal has already completed the assignments for Haley. So he's invited 3, but I can see that 1 has declined, 1 is in progress, and 1 has been completed. So I will actually go ahead and invite my peer reviewers for Harry because I still need to do that. And so if you go over the line on Harry and click on invite, you'll be brought to a questionnaire screen. So this is the questionnaire that employees that you're going to be sending peer reviews for will receive for this employee. So you can go ahead and just click next. And then one thing I want to point out is nowhere on this screen will you be able to see which employee you're actually selecting peer reviewers for. It doesn't list their name anywhere. So just be aware as you're doing this, if you get interrupted or you just lose your train of thought, which just happens, you will have to cancel out of this and reselect on the employee if you forgot who you were selecting peer reviews for. So I like to go ahead and type in just the first 3 letters of the first and last name, as the employees' names, when they look up in SABA, need to be spelled exactly. And if you're as terrible of a speller as I am, you'll never find the peer reviewer you're looking for. So the first 3 of each name is all that's needed. And then you go ahead and click search. And I like looking up Jessica Knudsen, as there are 3 Jessica Knudsens at Altru Health System, but I am looking for the Jessica in population health. So in order to drill around on more information, you could go down to the show option. And when you click on it, a little list will appear for you to select from. And I want to look by department. So when I select department, you can see that the departments appear in parentheses behind the employee's name. So I can see that I was looking for Jessica P. Knudsen in population health. And there she is. So go ahead and select the employee's name. It'll highlight in blue. And then you'll want to go over and select the relationship. Now you won't be able to add them until you select the relationship. The relationship does not change the type of form they get or anything like that. It actually allows you to, when you're completing the peer review for the employee that you're selecting these peer reviewers for, you can actually filter the peer reviewers by their relationship. So if you only want to see internal peer feedback, or maybe if you assign this to other leaders to give you feedback on this employee, you can search by that. Or if you have employees external to your department giving feedback, you can filter it that way as well. But for the most part, most of them will be peer. So I'll go ahead and select peer, and then I will select add. And then from here, you can go ahead and look for more employees. So you can highlight their name. I still have peer selected, and I'll select add. Now you can go ahead and remove if you accidentally clicked on the wrong, maybe Jessica P. Knutson, you selected one of the other Jessicas, and you can remove it right here. But once you're finished and you click OK, a pop-up will appear, kind of like that final, do you want to proceed? Once they receive this, you can't take it back, and you'll click OK. So if you do send it to the wrong Jessica Knutson, you clicked OK and sent it out, and you're like, oh, darn it, that's the wrong one. You unfortunately cannot take that back. You can't go back in and remove them from this list once you've invited them. You can, however, email me to remove them, but the employee can also decline. So if this Jessica knows they're not the correct Jessica or knows that they don't know this employee, they can decline it and give you a reason as to why they're declining it. So you don't always have to reach out to me, but you can, if any time, go back in and invite more employees. So I'm not going to actually send this out because Jessica probably wouldn't appreciate it, but I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. And then here you can see you do have the option to invite more after you've already invited them. Now, if you have all 3 of your employees that you've sent out completed, or they declined, or if all of them are done, you won't be able to invite any more employees. You'll have to reach out to me to roll this back and open it back up to you to invite more employees. But if it's open, you can invite more if you need more. But I'm going to go ahead and see who declined for this employee and which one is still in progress. So if you click on the button Manage, a pop-up will appear and you'll see the employees that you assigned, and I can see that Haley declined. And so when I go over to the little I next to the word declined and I click on it, I can see her reasoning was do not know this employee. So it's open text, so they can write whatever they want in here, but hopefully they give you enough of a reason so that you know why they declined. And then I can see that Harry is still in progress. And so you can send an email notification to them if that's how you communicate with your employees. Otherwise, feel free to communicate however you're most comfortable with in person, whichever is the way that they're expecting communication from you. But you do have the option to send an email from Saba notifying them. Now, let's say that I only really needed that one feedback from the one completed employee. I have to meet with this employee because they're going on a leave next week, and I need to start writing their performance review so that I can meet with them. You can go ahead and mark complete. Now, what the button mark complete means is you are closing out all of the peer review forms for Haley. So no employee who still was in progress will be able to complete any of the peer review forms that you've assigned to them. You are completing the entire step, whether they've responded or not. Now, you can't go back once you've hit that button. You can't open it back up. You'll have to reach out to me to open that back up for you. So if you have someone who you wanted to invite and didn't get a chance to, or just maybe missed them, you'll have to reach out to me to roll that back. Now, one thing I want to point out before you go ahead and hit mark complete, because you need to write your step of the performance review, is to make sure that the employee's self-review is complete. Because like we talked about earlier in this learning lab, that you have to have both peer reviewers fully complete and the self-review complete in order to access the leader rights performance review step. So what I'm going to do now is actually show you how you can go in and find that. So there's a few ways you can find the status. So I'm going to actually go back to the home page. And you can do it 2 ways. So you can find a task that says 2019 performance review. Now you're not going to be able to find it on this step because this is a managing step altogether, but you'll want to click on the 3 dots on the 2019 performance review process and click on task status. Now you can do that this way, or you can go on the sidebar menu and click on task status here. Either one will bring you to this page. So the task status page is truly the status of your tasks in this process. So you can go and make sure that tasks is the highlighted page you're on and you're viewing the 2019 performance review. You can view any process that's open to you as a leader. So some of you have the 30 and 90-day interviews, the 6-month performance review, the sitter competency, but I want to find the 2019 performance review. And when I'm on this page, I can see that here are all the steps for the performance review. They're all right here. Now, as a leader, you only have access to the steps that you have are writing or delivering. So they'll be highlighted blue. So write review for your direct report, meet with your direct report, sign off. Those are all blue because those are your assigned tasks. Now, you can view this status in any of them, whether you're in the write review for your direct report or meet with your report to review and sign off. But you can see here that if you go to view status next to the employee you're curious about, a pop-up will appear and you can see all of the steps for this specific employee. So I can see that Haley still needs to write her self-review because she has that little orange with the person in it, meaning it's her to do. And then she also has to have all of her peer reviews completed as well. So her peer reviews aren't complete. So in this specific example, if you are waiting on one peer review to be completed for Haley, but you really want to meet with her, try not to complete this step until she's completed the self-review and this is green. This will allow you to get a little bit more time for that peer reviewer to complete their step. And then you don't have to sit there for a few days waiting for the employee to complete their self-review. So just a little tip to make sure that you're getting all the peer feedback in that you can. So at this time, we are complete with the Performance Review Learning Lab. I want to thank you for listening to the past 45 minutes or so. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to Human Resources. We're always happy to help. And if you have any questions specifically about SABA or the Performance Review, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Erin Grabansky, and I'm the Performance Specialist in Human Resources. Thank you.